We've had a good amount of fairy tale news lately. Not only do we know what the title of the new fairy tale weekly manga that's coming back in Weekly Shonen Magazine is, we learn who is going to be the main character of that book. We learn a bit more of Mashima's thoughts on his bi-weekly release for the Fairy Tale Engineer's Quest manga. We get a bit of insight into Nalu, as well as some other stuff that is actually relatively interesting. Mashima had a pretty big interview in France for a convention, and I'm just gonna talk about briefly the most important stuff or stuff that I find interesting, as well as a few things from a Twitter space that I managed to find online for some specific updates on what's going on with him and, well, his works. So we got a good amount of stuff to talk about today, but before we jump into things, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. I'm very excited for what's going to happen next, and, well, let's just jump right into things, shall we? So let's just immediately talk about what the new fairy tale manga is going to be when it's released in Weekly Shonen Magazine. First off, big thing, it was originally supposed to start the first week of August, but Mashima was so ahead of schedule that they're releasing it a whole week early on July 29th. So that is absolutely insane work by Mashima, to the point where I don't even know if the man is human at this point. He's in his bag at this point, especially since this is the first time he's fully back on Fairy Tail on a weekly capacity, so I'm hyped on it. But let's just talk about the immediate big news for Fairy Tail, and that is the new weekly manga. And that we have the name of the new Fairy Tail manga and who is going to be the lead of this new manga. The name of this manga is going to be Fairy Tail Re-Fantasia, and by that title, I would not be surprised if over the course of the last year, Mashima has played Metaphor Re-Fantasio from Atlas Games, and I still need to finish that damn game. I barely made it past the beginning 4 hours of the game. I've had a lot of stuff going on, and I have not finished any games since. I have a lot of stuff to do now. But anyway, just from the title alone, we know what this is basically going to be about. Anyway, it's going to focus on the, well, Fantasia Day Parade, and Mashima himself has confirmed that this is going to focus on the Fantasia Parade. And for those of you that don't remember, back in the early days of Fairy Tail, during the Battle of Fairy Tail arc, we were introduced to the idea of the Fantasia Parade, a parade that the Fairy Tail Guild hosts every year for Magnolia. So, we're going to be focusing a lot more on that, the preparations for the parade and the parade itself. But what makes this very interesting is that Loxus is going to be the main lead of this book. Yes, Mashima is making Loxus the main lead of Fairy Tail for this mini adventure. And literally it gives us a lot to chew on, because remember, Loxus did the Battle of Fairy Tail on the day of the Fantasia Parade, pitting members of Fairy Tail against each other in his deluded attempt to make Fairy Tail stronger, and ended with his, well, expulsion from the guild and realizing his mistakes, even giving us more of an emotional connection between Loxus, Makarov, and how important the Fantasia Parade is to them and even the guild. And we got a good performance at the end of the day, and probably one of the most memorable and tear-jerking moments at the end of this arc when Loxus leaves, and I still tear up thinking about that moment. But making Loxus the main character of an arc that is focused on the Fantasia Day Parade is Mashima giving us basically what could be the final bit of Loxus's full-blown redemption arc. Well, yeah, Loxus is effectively fully redeemed by the end of Fairy Tail regardless. The Fantasia Day Parade is a very important thing for Loxus, and so having him be the main character in this arc, in this mini publication focused on the parade, shows that we're probably going to see Loxus wanting to make sure that this parade goes off without a hitch, that this parade is one of the best ever, and him wanting to make up for the trouble that he caused the last time he was in Magnolia for that parade. He almost destroyed the entire damn town and the guild. He was basically so deluded that he was going to kill everybody because of his own misguided attempts of strength and domination and wanting to become the next guild master. So this is going to be another layer onto Loxus's character, and I am excited for that, because this feels like the last bit of what Loxus has to do to truly make up for his past wrongs, despite him already doing everything he's possibly done to effectively just well, redeem himself and be a better person for it. And it just feels thematically relevant, and I'm very excited to see what Mashima has in store for that. Now let's just get over one extra thing. Nalu, in a Q&A, in a literal Q&A, someone in the crowd asked Mashima about Nalu, and Mashima just said, well, Natsu and Lucy care for each other and have feelings for each other that are stronger than friendship. But then on a Twitter space, after people immediately thought, okay, yeah, Mashima confirms that they're canon, 100%. Hello, everybody, we were right. And it's very obvious in the story, regardless of the fact, even if it wasn't fully confirmed. But then Mashima in a Twitter space just said, oh yeah, no, I did say that. However, while they are more than friends, they are less than lovers. Once more, the man, while he loves his fans and doesn't want to effectively let his fans dictate how he does relationships all the time, he doesn't really let that affect him, I think he's a liar. Because, man, the dude loves edging his audience. And while ships aren't everything, this just feels like the one thing that the entire fairy tale community just wants over and done with. Gruvia in 100 Years Quest is effectively a thing now. Jerza, Jalal and Urza, is effectively a thing. We just need one more connection with the two of them so that they can confess their feelings, because we've had shit developed for them as well. So, like, they're basically almost there. Nalu just needs that one extra push, because we have been teased so much in this story. I stopped caring, but then literally Mashima says this stuff and I'm like, oh man, dude, you're making me care when I really shouldn't. But yeah, that's Nalu off the table, yada yada yada. Next up is something that I was going to make a separate video on initially, but I'm just going to put it in here. And that is the writing style of Hiro Mashima when it comes to 100 Years Quest. Because if you've been reading 100 Years Quest, you would know that his writing style is not the same as when he was weekly with Fairy Tail in Zero, or even the same when he's going monthly with Dead Rock. And it really shows, because sometimes the chapters are super fast, we get fights and moments done like that, and then we have some stuff that might be dragged out a bit too much, or some things just feel like afterthoughts at moments and then they come back later, and they don't have the same impact as they should. Mainly in this arc that we are in right now, and while there's a lot of good stuff in this arc, it genuinely feels like Mashima forgets stuff sometimes, and then comes back later to retroactively remind us what's going on in himself, and then resolves that. That's something that Mashima himself has said, that it's hard for him, because for a bi-weekly release with how that schedule is, he says that sometimes he forgets what happens in the previous chapters, and so he has to constantly remind himself of what's going on, and that it does affect his writing, because weekly, he is just constantly writing the story one week at a time, or right after the other, without much of a break. And it makes sense based on how Eden Zero and Fairy Tail have been. Again, I have no reference for Rave Master, I have not read the whole manga yet, so I cannot say for Rave Master. But for Fairy Tail and Eden Zero, when you look back, yeah, even when there are moments where you're like, okay, I feel like this could have been like fleshed out more, you can see that there at least is some form of like somewhat consistency when it comes to the release of the chapters and what comes after the other. In 100 Years Quest, it feels a lot more iffy and all over the place half the time, and it's a real shame. Now, many would say, oh, but what about Mashima doing all this with Dead Rock? It's been very consistent, and things have been really good for Dead Rock. It hasn't really had any real big pacing issues or things that were just jumbled around. Yeah, that's what got me confused as well, but at the same time, while Dead Rock is monthly, Mashima ends up writing like 2 to 3 chapters worth of material, sometimes if he's really feeling it, almost 4 chapters worth in terms of like his general pacing and how he writes per monthly chapter. So even though it's monthly, he is definitely writing enough to go for 4 weeks straight per chapter. So I feel like with the sheer volume of stuff he's writing a month, it's easier for him to remember in comparison to a 17 to 20 page chapter every other week. And with that short chapter length, he also has to basically accelerate the pacing more due to the chapters coming out slower with the same page count. So I can kind of see that. Once more, I just want to basically say this because it's a question that Mashima's asked almost every time. He's asked what character he regrets not developing enough. He says Acnologia. He wishes he would have delved a lot more deeper into Acnologia. And this once more is me advocating for a prequel series following Acnologia to see his journey from normal guy to ruthless dragon monster slayer that just wants to end everything. That would be a fun short-term manga. Do it all Fairy Tail Zero style. I would love that. Mashima has also said that some of his favorite characters in anime and manga right now, outside of his own, like Ichigo and Happy, he says that he likes Gachi Akuta's Rudo and Engine. And he says, especially with what's going on in the manga right now, I am loving these too. And it does show that Mashima really does stay in touch and has his eye on the ground when it comes to other manga with his close colleagues like Kei Urana. And yeah, if you're not reading Gacha, because I read it right now, the stuff that's been going on in the manga recently has been amazing. So yeah, I don't blame Mashima for saying that it's good. Mashima also broke down his general schedule and how he works on multiple projects at a time, which is honestly insane, and he also recommends you don't do that, especially since sometimes he works on 3 series at the same time. Like 2 years ago when he was working on 100 Years Quest bi-weekly, Eden Zero weekly, and he was doing the art and writing for that, and the monthly releases of Dead Rock, and he highly recommends that nobody follow his lead and do all that stuff. And speaking of new manga, Mashima in a Twitter space actually confirmed that he is working on a new series, and it should be released soon, most likely next year. And we have no idea what it is, because Mashima does confirm it's gonna be something new. So I've already made a video on what it could potentially be, about last year, but I am very excited for that. And you bet your ass I am going to, through hell or high water, try and cover that series weekly, because it's a new Hero Mashima work. There's gonna be some level of hype around it, or curiosity. So I'm gonna be anticipating that whenever that comes out. Mashima was also asked, oh, you work on short and long series, which do you prefer? And Mashima just prefers, well, long series, because he gets to do a lot more with them, and as he writes, he can add new things because he's not, well, limited in the number of chapters that he initially plans. Honestly, this will probably explain why Dead Rock is going on longer than we initially thought. Mashima said it was supposed to be a short manga, probably converging about 6 to 7 volumes maybe, but now it's a lot longer. We got a time skip in the manga. It's on break for 6 months until the winter of 2027. So Dead Rock is definitely going to be already a lot longer, and it shows with how Mashima has been writing the story up until this point. Mashima was also asked what comes first when he's making a new work, and Mashima just breaks down when it came to Rave Master, Fairy Tail Eden Zero that they were all different in what he thought about when he was writing them. For Rave Master, the characters were what came to him first. And for Fairy Tail, it was the universe that he was placing the characters in with the idea of wizard guilds. And with Eden Zero, it was the fact that it was a sci-fi genre, which widely affected how that series was. So Mashima, depending on what series, it's whatever comes to mind first on what kind of story he's going to tell. It's either the genre, the characters, or the setting. Whichever he comes up with first, that's going to be what he develops for his next idea. Now, something I do want to end off on is Mashima's comments when it comes to being a mangaka who owns an intellectual property, but how it's turned into anime, video games, and other merchandise products, and how much control he has over that. And while Mashima's going to go super into detail, and this is going to tie into a different question that I'm just going to throw in at the end also, Mashima just says that regardless of the case, he has control over the original work, the original creation of the manga. And it's just a matter of his relationships with the people around him and who he works with. And he was lucky to be able to give any input into the Fairy Tail anime production. And it shows. There's some anime canon stuff. Mashima threw in corrections from the manga into the anime. A lot of corrections with stuff that he really wanted to add in that he didn't realize until retrospect. The Acnologia extra backstory, the Key to the Starry Heavens arc, that's stuff that he wanted to add in. The concept of the Eclipse Celestial Spirits, but unlike Key to the Starry Heaven, he literally wrote nothing for the Eclipse Celestial Spirit arc, which is why it is so goddamn awful. Yes, I'm not going to stop bitching about that arc. It is so boring. But he also mentions that it's not really the case for younger authors. For his first works, yeah, you're not really going to have any input on your series. Now, depending on the author and who's behind them, perhaps they'll have some input, maybe even for the studios. That could be a potential thing. But Mashima really just more so has more of a hands-off approach because of how things are, especially with video games and stuff like that. But he does mention that when it comes to the merchandise side of Fairy Tail, all they do is present him with stuff and he just says yes or no. And he jokingly says that if it's anything produced and made, any product is made in France, he's going to immediately give it his seal of approval, which is hilarious because in this interview we actually learned that France, which honestly I think weebs at this point understand that France, the second biggest consumer of manga on the planet, apparently France like really loves Fairy Tail, and that was a big like factor into Fairy Tail's overall success. So that's really nice to see. And one last thing when it comes to like Mashima like praising other authors and just saying that you should go out and look for a bunch of new series and always advocates for people to read more, he talks about the author of Radiant and how Radiant's anime was altered from the source material. Mashima gave him the advice to just slam the table in frustration, but also told him that sometimes you have no control over the anime adaptation and some things will end up getting altered, changed, or moved around. In the case of Radiant's anime, I heard a lot was changed. I'm about to read the manga soon. That is one of the next things that I plan on like binging for content eventually, because that's still ongoing. But Mashima just says in a pretty like sad but realistic way that at the end of the day, all you can hope for is that the anime is a promotion for the manga. Even if the adaptation is bad, you hope that the anime at least gets people somewhat interested in checking out the manga. Even if it's not great, even if it's not adapted super well, you would hope that it does bring attention to your work. And that is how like a lot of manga and mangaka end up getting attention to their series. It's kind of sad when an adaptation does very badly. Looking at you, Twin Star Exorcist anime, Half a Blue Exorcist Season 1, Tokyo Ghoul, the list goes on, but you get my point. And it is like a nice bit of advice for Mashima to just say, hey look, shit happens, we better, at the end of the day, we just gotta hope that it just brings more attention to the actual work that you yourself have control over. And that's really all that matters at the end of the day, I guess. But that's really all I wanted to highlight in terms of the recent interview from the convention in France with Hiro Mashima, and some random stuff from his Twitter space that I was able to get a hand on, to at least, talk to you about. It was mainly stuff about Nalu and his new manga. But either way, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this video and what Mashima has said about the future of his works and what brought into everything that he's made. Are you excited for the Loxus manga that we're getting in July? What do you think it's going to fully focus on? Do you think it's going to have some really good action sequences? Do you think we'll get more development for Loxus? Let me know in the comments section down below. And with all that said and done, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps and shows you guys enjoy to make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. With all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.